The problem must be me that all of a sudden after 20 odd years I'm just screwing things up. So I kept blaming myself.
Before sub-postmasters fell victim to the Horizon scandal, there was Capture, a different faulty piece of accounting software that was used by the post office in the 90s. Thousands of sub-postmasters who used Capture were wrongly blamed for shortfalls in their accounts' money, forced to repay huge sums, sacked, or even prosecuted. Steve Marston, now 69, was one of them. Accused of a £79,000 shortfall at his branch in Manchester, he said he was pressured into pleading guilty, despite never stealing a penny. Now he's fighting to clear his name and get justice. Ahead of a key meeting with the government on compensation, we spoke to Steve to hear his story.
Well, I'm hopeful that we're going to find out some good news today because this has been going on so long. I think it's about time that they actually came through with something solid. Our biggest enemy is time. They pretty much insisted that we get the Capture software in. Only offices that actually went and used Capture would be guaranteed survival. So I got Capture. So after 20 odd years without issue, in 12 months of using Capture, I lost £79,000. I always thought computers were like a glorified calculator, 2 + 2 = 4, so it couldn't be the calculator. The problem must be me that all of a sudden after 20 odd years I'm just screwing things up. So I kept blaming myself. I just kept covering. I had savings. When that run out, the hole just got bigger. The losses kept growing. I kept covering it up. The post office auditors, I wasn't allowed to watch it take place, which is strictly against post office rules and regulations. After the audit took place, I wasn't allowed to drive back home in my own car. They took me back to Blackpool. We just bought a house in Blackpool because we were actively moving to Blackpool, buying another post office there. I told them in the car that I hadn't taken a penny. I said, well, what about the software? They said there's nothing wrong with Capture. There's nothing wrong with the computer. One of the auditors took the keys off me for the building. I was never allowed back into the property. My wife was briefly allowed to go in and take some shop stock out, but was never allowed to go into the private property. It was still fully kitted out with furniture, sofas, TVs, videos, the full Monty. Never saw that again. We have no idea what actually happened to any of it. I never received a letter of suspension. In fact, I never received a letter of termination. But they illegally withheld my wages during that period, 7.5 months as it turned out. And because obviously I didn't have any income, couldn't pay the mortgage, the house got repossessed. And then in the end we ended up sleeping on the floor in a pokey little flat in Blackpool. No furniture, no nothing, just sleeping on the floor. We decided, no, we can't stay here in Blackpool any longer. So we just moved down south and went from there. As far as the actual court case was concerned, I pleaded guilty. I wasn't given any choice. It was either that or else jail. That's what they told me. I asked my best man to actually give evidence on my behalf for the trial, and he never even responded to me. Totally rejected and gutted. And it's had a terrible effect on my wife and the kids as well. Still ongoing. We've all had counselling. My counselling is still ongoing, as is my wife's, on medication, for depression, etc. It's always there. You go to bed at night, you sleep, well, you try to sleep. You're always dreaming about the post office. In one shape or form, you're dreaming all the time about the post office. You literally walk along the street and you think that somebody's watching you. So we've lived in the village, 13 years now. We've been to one of the pubs twice in 13 years. That's all. We don't go anywhere. We have no friends. We don't trust anybody. I want action taken. I want the people responsible for this to be brought to justice. I mean, they knew when the software was released in 1992 that there were massive issues with the software, and yet they still insisted on pushing it down our throats. They also said I was the only one to have problems with Capture, and I believed it. Unfortunately, I believed it for nearly 30 years until this all started coming up. It's just soul-destroying, it really is. If it hadn't been for the programmers' debates, getting the idea or planting that seed in the mind. The only difference is the name, the software, Capture, Horizon, everything else has been identical. We've all suffered from criminal convictions, bankruptcy, lost homes, lost our businesses. My most important thing obviously is to get the